Hey 605D, it's Dr. Zitzman. A few people have asked about the biopsychosocial part 1, and so I wanted to recap it and refresh our thinking about what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're doing it. So I'm going to share my screen and walk through this with you. Now, this comes from the weekly learning activities, so you'll find this in that folder. It's in a description of the assignment. And you'll see here that the real goal of the assignment is sort of twofold. One, I want to make sure that you are having an opportunity to sit with a real client, to ask them questions, to practice asking hard questions, to practice pacing yourself. In other words, to practice doing the actual assessment. The other part of this assignment is that I need you to be practicing writing up what you discover. So this is really the heart of what this assignment is about, right? Writing up an assessment. So in here, you'll see a few things, right? You are not just sort of summarizing, but you are you're showing me that you can use language that reports data, that reports the facts, that is non-judgmental, that is professional language, not sort of cliche language, using quotation marks if you're going to use specific words, or specific phrases from the client. And identifying sources. So, to say things like the client stated, the client denied, the client, explained. This is all showing me that the information that you're gathering and sharing is stuff that the client has relayed to you. I'll go over that again in a second, but as we move through, you'll see here, agency context, referral information, client information. These should be the headings in your paper. So I would like to see, this wording. That way I know where we are. I don't want all this to blend together. I want headings that show me, okay, here I'm talking about the agency context. Now you don't have to use these as specific, prompts within there, but I want you to answer each of those within this little sub area. So for example, under agency context, I want that to be a subheading. And then you would say things like, this assessment was conducted at Catholic Charities of DC. The mission of Catholic Charities is X, Y, and Z. Services include psychotherapy, group counseling, and housing interventions, or whatever. Primarily, this agency serves such and such population. Done. So in other words, you have used this language as the heading, and then you're showing me, as you're describing the agency, that you're meeting all of the points underneath that heading. Similarly, let's go to client information. Okay, client reports being a 54-year-old male, and then just boom, go through all the identifying things. Providing a brief description of the person can be in your words. So you can say something like, this clinician observed the client entering the agency in a professional manner, or in appeared to be well kept and engaging in activities of daily living, things like that. The flip might be true. You might say, client appeared to be somewhat disheveled, presenting with clothes that had holes and an unwashed, face or body. That is showing me that you're just describing what's happening. You're not judging the client for it. You're just making note and observing the condition the person is in. All right. So that's, but again, you're owning it as this clinician observes, not just a statement. So you're owning it as your own. Client issues and a brief history of the issue. Here you are going to be talking about what the primary presenting problem is. So there might be a lot of things, and that's okay to touch on, but I want you to hone in on what is this client really coming in for? What brought them here today? What's the thing that's most pressing on their mind? And then, of course, give me some details about that. How do they see it versus how do other people see it? How, when did they begin? How have they dealt with this in the past? It's a little solution focus there. And what would the client most want help with? That's going to set you up for the biopsychosocial part 2. All right. And then all of this data down here is the stuff that you're going to ask in addition to the presenting problem to get a kind of bigger picture view of who this client is. Okay. To note, if there's something that is not really applicable to your client, don't just skip it. Make a note that you have asked it and the client, basically it's not applicable to the client. So for example, maybe you are working with a teenager who is, 16, very healthy, just fine, no medical problems. So when you get to this part about medical history, you will say client denies any medical history of concern. Done. You don't have to develop that. There's nothing really to say, but by acknowledging to me the client denies this, it says, hey, I've asked a question about medical history and there's nothing to report. So it's at least acknowledging that the question was asked. It's not just ignoring and skipping it. Okay, it's a big difference. It makes a difference. I'll also note in this section in particular, since you have, it's almost like subheadings underneath client data, as opposed to questions like up here, you can use these as subheadings. So you can say developmental history, boom, that's a subheading under the heading of client data that then goes into describing, the client's developmental history. So here you can use these things as subheadings under the heading of client data. One other thing I wanted to get to is down here, EcoMap. I do want you to provide an EcoMap. So you can try this on your computer. If you have to draw it by hand, that's okay. Just upload it at the same time with your paper. But the EcoMap will be with the client as the central focal point of that EcoMap. And the EcoMap itself can include environmental stressors. Now note that while I want you to draw out an EcoMap, you can then in the body of your paper describe the EcoMap in terms of the other environmental assets that you identify on the EcoMap. So maybe, for example, you describe that this is a 75-year-old client who's wanting to age in place, and you might say that they have secure housing, they have caregivers that come weekly or whatnot. Perhaps this person is from a privileged background to be able to afford these things. So those are things you can identify in the EcoMap and then describe within the body of the paper. Strengths, resilience, protective factors. This is sort of a broad category. Strengths and resilience are usually things within the person. So the client might identify their own strengths for you. Sometimes we can ask that as a question. So perhaps you see something like a client's persistence or optimism or ability to navigate healthcare systems or these types of personality traits or skills, strengths within the person. We might also say protective factors could be things around this person. So for example, maybe you're working with a child who has pretty pronounced autism or symptoms on that spectrum. And so maybe a protective factor is that they have parents who are very involved and devoted to getting services for them. So that protective factor is unique, but very important to name and identify in this assessment. Unique qualities. This is, you've already talked about race and ethnicity, other aspects of diversity within the client information at the top. Down here, we're talking about something that might be more specific to this particular client. So yesterday I was talking to Lavinia, and she gave a great example of, let's say you have a client who's really engaged in spoken word, right? So maybe that we could say that there is a unique quality to that this is spoken word is something that is an artistic expression for that person, for your client. It also allows them to explore, to tap into, to share parts of their own cultural identity with others in a meaningful way. And they have, social supports through a whole spoken word community. So that's something that's very specific to this particular client that I taps into some part of their cultural diversity identity that might not have come up just in your sort of run-of-the-mill assessment earlier. So unique qualities is something specific to this person. The whole report should be no longer than 10 pages. This is not, a fluffy creative writing contest by any means. This is you showing me that you can pace yourself, organize your thoughts, present them in a non-judgmental way, using professional language, and write really concisely, actually. Right to the point, right? As if you're writing for someone who, is on a team with you who would need to read and understand this assessment. That's what we're looking for. So, and integrate at least 2 readings from the course. So, you can do this anywhere. People certainly talk about, where was it? Developmental history, you can easily draw there. Environmental assets and stressors, you could draw from your 606 texts. Certainly substance use, spirituality, life cycle stage, genograms, like all these are areas, the strengths, what is strengths. So all those are areas that you have had readings on, either this class or other classes that you can draw from in order to kind of incorporate the classroom learning with this exercise. I hope that's helpful. I will note that the unfortunate thing is that this assignment is due on Sunday, which is Easter Sunday. So if you need extra time, please just email me, let me know. So if you want to try and get it out ahead of time, great. But if you need an extension, I'd much rather you have the time and opportunity to engage in Holy Week, besides writing up your biopsychosocial spiritual assessment. So just reach out to me in order to coordinate. All right. Email zitzman@cua.edu. Otherwise, I hope this is helpful, and I look forward to reading more soon. All right. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.